Hello and welcome to the Sometimes Relevant, Always Talking Football podcast. You're here with James
Hi.
and me, Jack. Today, James wants to talk about the European Super League. Take it away.
Right, so Jack, you may have seen a report that recently there's been talk about changes to what we currently call the Champions League and previously called the European Cup. And one of these ideas is a Super League. Now, I want to start off just before we get to the Super League by going through something that the Barcelona president talked about when he was over in the country because they played and hammered Arsenal the other week, didn't they? So he did an interview with the BBC. And in this interview, you're probably aware that Manchester United, Chelsea, and Liverpool have been doing crap all season. So they're not going to finish in the top four. Well, United might now, but at the time, it looked like they all had no chance. So he was asked what he thought about Champions League wildcards, which is the first step to this. And he was quoted as saying, "Sometimes for the interest of football, why not give wildcards like in tennis? Sometimes the top players don't qualify under given wildcards. This can happen in football. Sometimes clubs have a bad season and it is a big punishment not to play in the Champions League. We need a stronger Champions League and more interest for football fans and to make it more competitive." Do you have an opinion on the wild cards, firstly?
I think his statement there, the particular sentence, club to lose a Champions League place for having a bad season is a huge punishment. Of course it is. Of course it is. Well, I think you can't say Man United are having like a really quite bad season. I know we're on a 4 winning run streak at the moment, but I mean,
Yeah.
all in all, it's a bad season, and in all likelihood, we're not going to get a Champions League place, even though we're level with Man City now. And I
Maybe
think,
if you do Liverpool and Chelsea, I would say.
yeah, and I mean, like to say that we might have like a get out of jail free card with this wild card thing, like banking on it. I mean, like it's ridiculous. What I think the Barcelona president's really saying is that people don't want to watch like Leicester versus like Ghent or whatever in the Champions League. They want to watch Man United versus Liverpool or Man United versus Barcelona.
Well, they're
That's what he thinks in his opinion anyway. And
I yeah, I see. I agree with you there. Now, I was talking to my dad about this, who's a Manchester United fan like yourself, and it kind of talking and saying it kind of demeans a competition if you go to a team like, let's say Leicester City do the miracle that we all want them to do and win the title this season, and everybody will be thrilled that they've won the title. It almost sounds like the Barcelona president's coming out and saying, I think we will receive less money in the next television deal if teams like Manchester United, Liverpool, and Chelsea, who have bigger fan bases, aren't in it, and Leicester City are there." I think it's kind of, if I was a Leicester City fan or a Tottenham fan as well, because they barely ever finish in the top four, I'd be taking it as quite an insult. And then I'm also thinking, you're talking about wild cards, right? And he brings up tennis as an example. Now, tennis has wild cards, but you never see Roger Federer get a wild card because Roger Federer never drops out of the top 32 in the world.
yeah,
So he's never, ever going to need a wild card. And nor is Djokovic or Murray or Nadal, the top players. Now, you might give someone a one just for a bit of nostalgia, but they never usually win whatever they're in. Well, they might have had an injury, but tennis is also an individual sport. So if your Rafael Nadal has had an injury for a year, nobody can make the ranking points for him, can they? So it's a completely different comparison between those two.
yeah. Also, while we're just on the subject of tennis as well, like that seeding system that
Yeah,
could work in certain situations in football. I think like the early stages of the FA Cup, also it may be in the early stages of the Champions League as well. So that way you have like maybe have all the big teams in it by the end, if that's what you want. But I mean, even then, that's still a bit iffy.
but we kind of do that, don't we? Because like for instance, the Europa League is kind of slightly more obvious at it. Is that usually the team that finishes fifth gets into the group stage straight away, like the teams that finish first, second, and third in England get into the group stage of Champions League straight away. They don't have to play another match to get there. and then you have this kind of like you'd almost say fourth place, a bit like playing a wild card playoff to get there. They're not guaranteed. So, and same with the team that finishes seventh or wins the League Cup. So, I mean, but in tennis as well, like they know there's that tournament at the end of the season. People might know it as the ATP World Tour Finals.
Yeah.
If Murray was ninth in the world, Murray wouldn't get a wild card into it. The only way Murray would get into it is if someone had to withdraw. There'd be no wild card. So for the top tournament of tennis, the one that you actually qualify for through what would be league position, there's no wild card. Wimbledon, there's a certain amount of wild cards and all other tournaments because you put in a couple of people from your country. But obviously, and that's to get people experience as well. But you never see a wild card progress very far. It's pretty much like Celtic.
My overwhelming thoughts on this subject is, though, that to say to a team like Leicester, who are doing the impossible, despite like their financial inequality compared to teams like Arsenal, Man United, Man City, and Chelsea, and then for them to do the impossible to get into a Champions League spot and even win the league, and then be told by like this Super League bullshit that they can't get in because they've got not a good enough global image or brand is absolute bollocks.
Yeah, I mean, it's not their fault, that Manchester United and previously before that, Liverpool went.
Well, to be honest, James, just to be honest, Leicester could be growing their global brand every day, aren't they?
Well, yeah. If in 5 years' time, let's say Leicester maintained the level where they were finishing in the top 5 for 5 years, their global brand would be as big as Manchester City's and arguably Chelsea's. So, and they're building a brand as well that actually I think is slightly different. People, especially people from our country, but people from around the world, love the underdogs. Leicester City are currently building a brand of being this really plucky opposition, and I can't find anybody who doesn't like Leicester City. Everybody I talk to, whether they support United or Chelsea or Liverpool,
apart from Arsenal fans,
apart from Arsenal and Spurs, and up to a point, City fans who still think they've got a chance, want Leicester to win the league. And even if you talk to those Arsenal fans, those Spurs fans, they'll say if we don't win the league, we want it to be Leicester. Now, obviously, they don't want it to be their main rival, but they're more giving the point that they want it's a miracle that Leicester are even to be honest, I predict them to go down. So it's a miracle they're in the top half to me.
They could still go down next season.
Yeah, because how many players are gonna jump ship to Leicester?
Well, from what I've heard of like players like Riyad Mahrez, they're saying they want to play with Leicester and play against teams like PSG and like Barcelona in the Champions League. I think they'll stay for the next season.
Yeah,
in the Champions League, I think they'll stay.
If you've earned a place to be honest, at the beginning of the season, I'd said for either European competition with a team like Leicester, you should then stick around and reap the rewards because that crowd there, regardless of this European Super League bullshit, which we'll go back to in just a second, those crowds will absolutely love you to an extent. The atmosphere will be better than Dortmund. It will be better than Anfield and Celtic Park and Old Trafford in the semi-final of the Champions League.
And I mean, they'll be able to afford like £30 million players.
Yeah, should they decide that's the way they're going to go, they could buy in their Marco Reus.
Anyway, carry it back to the Super League.
So obviously that's the first thing that started off any of this speculation regarding European Super Leagues. Now, yesterday, I think you might also be aware that there was a report of teams meeting up. Reportedly, Manchester United and Manchester City, Arsenal and Chelsea and Liverpool meeting up in London's Dorchester Hotel.
Now, wasn't that denied?
Well, the meeting definitely happened. The reasons of the meeting was denied. Now, they met up with the meeting was organised by an American billionaire, Stephen Ross, who I did a bit of research on, and essentially he owns a company that is behind some big sporting events. The one that would you be aware of if you're a football fan would be the International Champions Cup, which is that random tournament pre-season that Manchester United have been in the last 2 years. Liverpool and Chelsea have also figured.
Real Madrid.
Real Madrid, yeah, they played in it in China and Australia, and Manchester City. So all these teams, I don't know if Arsenal have, but all the other teams have had some sort of play in this league, as have Barcelona, PSG, Real Madrid, and a lot of other top European, the Milan teams and Juventus. So there was a meeting with him. Now, the speculation was that him and his sport group want to try and, because of the issues going on in UEFA and stuff, and I think it's also part of the upheaval of FIFA, to try and propose a complete breakaway of about 20 teams from around Europe, so your PSGs, your Barcelonas, and your United, to set up a European Super League, which I think would be best described as kind of a bit like the NFL, a standalone league with no sort of promotion, no sort of relegation between what are regarded the 20. Wouldn't say the 20 best, but the 20
the 20 clubs with the biggest global brands.
Yeah,
essentially.
20 biggest revenue. Yeah,
the 20 most profitable clubs in the world, or something like that. Most financially, whatever, secure.
Yeah, because I mean, if I said the 20 biggest, I would probably take Manchester City and PSG outside of the proceedings and put in Marseille and Roma. So, but yeah, the 20 biggest revenue and 20 most profitable and richest clubs in the world, really. And so, Arsenal came out yesterday, and they told Press Association Sports, and I quote, "We are strongly opposed to any breakaway. Not Arsenal, nor any clubs at the meeting are seeking changes to the Premier League and European landscape, and no conversations surrounding displacing the Premier League or starting a European Super League took place. Discussions were primarily about the International Champions Cup and the format of European competitions that will complement the existing Premier League." So, what's your opinion on that? Because there is some between the line stuff, I think.
Well, I think you've got to take most of what he says as the truth. I mean, yeah, well, I'd be inclined to believe him, to be honest.
So, because I mean, there is that one. The one that I think is distressing is the last bit where they say discussions are primarily around the ICC. Okay, that's pointless, and the formats of European competitions that will complement the existing Premier League. Now,
okay, yeah.
Does that sound like I wonder whether Arsenal think?
Yeah, I didn't hear that, but yeah, that sounds a bit, yeah.
I wonder if you're Arsenal or whether you. I mean, I'm going to come to the two American-owned teams in a second. Arsenal kind of half and half, but if you're Arsenal and you look at that, or any of the five, are you talking about the idea of going to the Premier League? We'll stick with playing in you, but you've got to cut the teams to 15. I wonder, and then and we'll also have this European League and the Champions League will go. We don't want the League Cup. Maybe we'll have the FA Cup, and try and make it so there's every Saturday you're playing a league game, and every Wednesday you're playing a European Super League game.
That kind of thing is just butchering everything that's good about football for the sake of money. I suppose we shouldn't be surprised.
No, I wouldn't be surprised. But this is the one thing that concerns me. The other, this is Anfield pointed out, amongst others, that Liverpool and Manchester United are both American-owned football teams. Now, Arsenal also have their biggest stakeholder is also American. America, if you look at their leagues, the NBA, the MLS, the NFL, and the NHL, and none of those leagues have any sort of promotion or relegation in them at all whatsoever. See, the way that you get new cities having clubs is if a club's owner moves the clubs to the different city, such as I think it was the Rams have moved to LA or something like that. And they always, that's how teams get new cities get new teams. There's no relegation. Do you think the American owners are kind of looking for that sort of stability of those leagues where you can be as shit as anything, but you'll still be in the top five?
Well, yeah, because I mean, like that means they'll be financial. They'll know they're getting a lot of money consistently in. But I mean, that does seem like an American way of looking at things, especially for someone. Because I mean, even the Glazers, even though they've been in charge of Old Trafford for donkey's years, they're not they're not real football fans. I would wager, even despite that. So anything that means they're going to get more money, that means they're going to make their shareholders happy. That's my thoughts on it. I don't know what you think about Liverpool.
I mean, my concern with Liverpool is I know that's about the Glazers, but FSG also own the Boston Red Sox, and obviously the Boston Red Sox have years, and it's probably it's kind of learned it over the time that they've owned Liverpool. So Boston Red Sox have years where they are dog shit and like bottom of the bottom in there, and they come back the next year and they can almost do the whole Leicester City thing of let's go and win the league, let's go and win the World Series.
Mm.
And it's like, but if it was the Premier League, they'd have got relegated the year before. And then they just went into, there's not a transfer system in it in the same way. So there is other considerable differences where they throw a lot of money into contracts, bring in a few people in, but that way. And then they go and win the World Series, but they should be in the second division if it was like the Premier League. And you would argue that that means that it's kind of like this elite database of clubs, whether it's in football or any other sport, where they just will always be the big clubs. And I'm sure that the owners like that. But as a football fan, it's that question: would you really buy in to your club if they left their own domestic league? Because there's
It's
one
too much. Football fans don't like change. That's the main thing.
no, because I mean, do you remember when Division One turned into the Coca-Cola Championship?
Mm.
And then there's also some like other bits. I mean, we have. I mean, you're looking at the European Super League, like in its sense. Do you really think that Liverpool are good enough to be in the European Super League?
I think that in their terms of like membership, their history probably makes them good enough.
Okay. What about AC Milan? Is that the same sort of scenario? Because
Well, yeah, you'd assume so, James. I mean, like, I want to wrap our thoughts up on this. I mean, like, I think if you're gonna ask me, do I think it will happen? I don't think it will. I think they can plan all they like, but when they announce their plans, I think they'll be so ridiculed and so much we put against it that they'll have to abandon them.
I don't think it will happen, and the reason I don't think it will happen isn't because of the English clubs. I'm looking towards Germany and thinking that you're going to have to take at least 3 German clubs into the European Super League. Like Bayern Munich could probably walk into it quite happily. We know that. Borussia Dortmund, look at everything they say. I mean, I've been doing a bit of reading about them, and I mean, their owners, they say they can make 3 times the profit as they do as a club by just upping the tickets to their prices, and people would pay for it. But they want to be a football club about the people, about the town, and about the country. And I just think that, like, the Dortmund's view, I just don't think that we'd have a Super League with a club like Dortmund in it. I think you look at Atletico Madrid, who I think would resist to it. And maybe there's other teams. The sad thing is, I think if there was to be a European Super League, the clubs that would pull it forward would be Manchester City, PSG, Real Madrid, and Barcelona. I think those would be the 4 teams that would be desperate for a European Super League. Because for PSG, it was the only way to compete with Real Madrid and Barcelona, because their league is rubbish.
Yeah. So final thoughts. We both think it's not going to happen.
No, but I think there'll be changes to the Champions League.
Okay. So have you got any other thoughts? We're going to wrap up there.
I think there'll be wildcards to the Champions League. But before we wrap this up, I think we should just go to the one questionable point. Obviously, in the last few days, there's been a cup final as well, and I know that you were bullying me about the penalty takers. So, just to wrap this one up, let's just go over there for about 1 minute. Do you think the excuse, do you think the penalty takers were right, and do you think Manchester City's excuse for losing last night was a pretty poor excuse?
Well, let's start with the second one. Well, Liverpool played in the same final as Man City, so no, that's absolutely not an excuse. It's utter bullshit. Number one, of course, I wasn't happy with the penalty takers. Emre Can looked like Klopp was like, in the semicircle prior to the penalty, like Klopp was warming Emre Can up, and yeah, I expected Emre Can to take the first one because he looked so ready for it. Didn't he take one in your last penalty shootout first?
Yeah, he missed.
Yeah, but in this one he stepped up, put like a nice little one away with a little chip, and then it all went downhill from there. I mean, I thought Lucas had a great game for you in that match, but he obviously couldn't take the penalty. I don't think he deserved to have that
taking the penalty.
Pressure thrust upon him.
Milner and Henderson?
Yeah, Milner, Henderson and Sturridge are the main ones. Mainly Henderson, first of all. He's your club captain and supposedly your regular penalty taker. Or maybe that's behind Milner now, I'm not sure. But Milner's scored a lot of penalties for you this season. I mean, both of them should have been definite. I don't know if they were doing like some kind of random thing where they were waiting for like Milner or Henderson to take one last when they need it most. Maybe that's what Man City were doing with Yaya Toure.
To being fifth. Milner was taking the fifth penalty.
Right, okay, but Henderson should be taking the first one. He's the club captain. It's just expected, and the main striker should also take one. It's just done.
Now, the only counterpoint I have to the striker one, because I agree with you on the others, is in 2012 Liverpool went to penalties, same competition. Liverpool had a player, certain Luis Suarez, might have heard of him. He didn't take a penalty in the 5 penalties that Liverpool took in that final. I mean, he was useless at penalties. Let's be fair. But he didn't take one, and he was obviously at that point the main striker.
Yeah, I just don't. I think your reaction, Liverpool fans' reaction to it, says it all. I want Klopp to explain why Sturridge and Henderson didn't take one.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Sturridge didn't play yesterday because he's.
Yeah, I think he was out.
I mean. So, he may well have missed out, and it's a regrettable thing. And at the end of the day, fans, and it's one of the things, it might be different at other clubs, but I don't particularly remember fans turning on a guy that missed a penalty in a shootout before. So, and I don't see people really lashing out at Lucas or Coutinho or Lallana.
Lucas had a great game, and he missed a penalty.
It's about having the guts to get up there and take it. If they miss it, it's a lottery.
I think the main point you take away is Jamie Carragher's reaction to it.
Which was?
That Henderson and Sturridge should have both taken penalties.
I agree. I mean, maybe Sturridge had cramp, but 5 steps to boot it in. Henderson would have been fine to take one.
Henderson was fighting with Mario Balotelli, who's a much better penalty taker than him last season.
If I was the manager and all the players stood up and said, I'm willing to take a penalty, I'd have probably gone in the order of Henderson, Milner, Can, maybe Toure can take a penalty. I remember him taking them for Arsenal, and it'd be funny. And then Sturridge is a fifth. If Sturridge is really that cramped out, then give him the fifth one, give him that time, and let him take the fifth. But the 2 midfielders should be first. That means Steven Gerrard was always first in penalty shootouts, except for Istanbul, where he didn't take one because he was a fifth taker, and we didn't need him. But I think
let's wrap it up there, James. The whole point, our points are that they should have taken them.
Our points are that Liverpool players should have had more guts to take the penalties, and that Milner should have been higher up the order of the 5, and that we don't think there'll be a European Super League. So clearly, as the fact with UEFA, you should have nothing to worry about.
So thanks for listening to the Sometimes Relevant Always Talking Football podcast. If you want to get more from us, go to sometimesrelevantblog.wordpress.com. You've been here with James and Jack, the questionably talented podcasters. Goodbye.
Toodaloo.